Bon. Kwekskina, my name is Alexandre Nequado, and I'm here with my colleague André Dudemaine, and our guest this week is Ellen Gabriel. So, Ellen, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, saya gusto ko yung Katsi'tsakwas na YouTube tano kanya to. Kanya kahaga kanya do te tano Kanehsatà gana kere. Nyao chitas kung karawi André, and my Mohawk name is Katsi'tsakwas, which means picking up flowers. I'm Turtle Clan, and I'm kanya kahaga or Mohawk from the community of Kanehsatà, which is 62 kilometers northwest of Montreal.
Gwegwe, Ellen, we are really happy to have you with us. You recently studied in New York City and in film production, and can you speak about it? Because we know that first you study arts at Concordia when you were very young, and now it's like another art that you are taking in your life.
Yeah, I studied documentary filmmaking at the New York Film Academy, and it was during the pandemic, so it was by Zoom. I had one in-person class and went for my graduation, but other than that, everything was by Zoom. And it's basically to sort of expand on my artistic skills, because I use my art in my documentaries, and to tell our story from our side, our perspective, which I think is really important, and not just making people aware, but as a legacy for the youth and future generations coming to know what we went through and what our perspective is.
And also we are very happy because the jury of the Montreal First Peoples Festival this year gave to your film the best Canadian short. Can you speak about this film in particular?
Yeah, well, I was very honored to receive that from the Présence Autochtone Film Festival, and it's called Kanehsatà, which is When the Pine Needles Fall, and it's about most of the film is about July 11th, 1990, which was the first of 78 days of a siege of our community. And it's the role of the women, what the women faced when they went to meet the SWAT team, the importance of the land, why land is so important to us, and just a really tiny bit of our origin, who we are as Oklahoma peoples, part of the Iroquois Confederacy, and those things are really important to lay the foundations of a story. This is who we are. This is where we come from. This is why, we made a blockade on March 9th in 1990. And, it was a very difficult time, very challenging time for many people. But it also, for me, I think it was important to talk about those first few hours, because those first few hours set the stage for where we are today, in the sense that from our testimony at a Senate Standing Committee, or Parliamentary Standing Committee, we recommended the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. And so from there, the Royal Commission revealed a lot of stuff. So it's recognizing and the people who stood up for the land, the women who stood up for the land, and the men, and why it's really important to reclaim that narrative and express ourselves in a way that people can understand. I guess in a way humanizing us, because we were dehumanized by the government by the police forces and the Canadian Army. So, it's a traumatic experience. Most people, I would say probably everybody, had post-traumatic stress from that. And so today in the community, we're experiencing, trauma reactions. So we have a long way to go for our community to heal. So this is, I think it's going to be like a series of films that I would like to do to talk about my community, which is it's the oldest community of the Kanehsatà people in existence. That's still a community in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that the woman role in Indigenous resistance and Indigenous culture is not really present in the medias and the narrative? Because several films, documents, and books have been made on the so-called Oka crisis. Mm-hmm. And now you arrive with this particular perspective. Do you think you are filling a place that has been forgotten?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we as Indigenous people, we're always fighting the stereotypes said about us, and to bring back, that being president of Femmes Autochtones Quebec, you become more aware of how little respect or validation is given to Indigenous women's leadership. So for us as a matrilineal culture, our clans come through our mothers, right? And in our culture and our protocol and our laws, it's the women that hold title to the land. But I think because history has been told by a paternalistic society, that perspective of the importance of the men, that's fine. But there's always, this paternalistic view that the women were just there to cook. When women were actually on the battlefields, as either as medics, you want to call them medics, medicine people, particularly a democratic society in which we were equal in decision making. So it gives you an idea, the importance and the strength of women, because the men during that summer always came to the women to ask us what to do next. If the police were trying to provoke during the night, they would come to the women and say, the police are shooting at night. What do we do? And we'd say, don't shoot back, because that's what they want. And so there was this role of the women was really overshadowed, by guns, by weapons, and this very militaristic sort of point of view that sort of justified the Canadian government's overuse of force. So women are taking their rightful place now, and we want to change what the history books have said. For us as Indigenous women, there's so many colonial rooted problems, but the positive part is that women had very important roles in most Indigenous societies, I think, and to bring that and elevate it back to, or restore it to pre-colonial times, I think is a challenge. And so storytelling, I think, is the best way to demonstrate that strength, and that contribution to the survival of our nations.
I don't know if you have seen, it has been just opened last week in the McCord Stewart Museum, the exhibition of wampums. And there is the famous two dogs, so-called two dogs wampum, that normally give recognize the territory of the Kanehsatà to the Mohawk community. And it has never been recognized by the colonial law. And I think it's very strong to have it exposed now with all other wampums at this time, because now it seems that there is some evolution in maybe not all the public opinion, but part of it, and to reconsider the wrong that has been done during the last centuries.
Yeah, I mean the Tudag Wampum is it was an agreement made with the rich blue bloods from France, the Seminary of Saint-Sulpice, and it wasn't like an oath to loyalty to them. It was very much, these strangers arrive and they're with other indigenous peoples in the dead of winter, and they need to cut wood to heat their homes and cook. So the Ganyakahag of Kanehsatà made an agreement with them to say, we know you're Christian, we know you need to survive, so before you cut any wood, you have to consult with us. And I think the assumption was that they would move on after the winter. And it was contrary, because the seminary, the Sulpicians lied the whole time. And it's like any kind of treaty in history, the moment the ink is not even dry, there's a contradiction, right? They overturn what is an agreement into something that is more dominion over indigenous people, rather than a recognition that this is our homeland, this is our territory. We are going to care for the land, and we know how to care for the land. And so we need to tell you that these are special spots you can use, and this is not. But the Sulpicians were rich. They hired their own security force. They occupied Kanehsatà in the early 1900s. 1990 was not the first time we were occupied. We also have another wampum belt of Kanehsatà as a recognition that we are the eastern door and the Confederacy. And so that wampum belt is that memory of how long Kanehsatà have been part of the Confederacy before contact. And I'm glad that I'd like to go see it. I mean, we already have a replica here in our cultural center, but I'd like to go see the wampum belts and the McCord.
Yes, we can right now to the people that are listening to us, that to say to them that yes, this is certainly an exhibition to go and to visit. It is there till March, I think, March next year. Okay. And the indigenous individuals can access for free at the museum. So that's a good opportunity to connect with a important part of our history and our cultures.
Exactly.
Yeah. Were you? New York was a Mohawk territory too, and how it felt to be in studying in New York when you are at home in Kanehsatà.
Yeah, I mean, New York is always an exciting city to visit, and there's so much going on. It's aside from Los Angeles, it is the hub of many artistic endeavors, including film. And when I did go, I did see some filming being shot at night on one of the streets. But I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of what New York City or that island must have looked like before contact, right? Beautiful wooded areas, farms, cornfields, and indigenous people living there off the land. And then when we see this concrete jungle, it's amazing what happens in 500 years, essentially. But, New York has a very distinct spirit to it. There's a Native American community house that's there as well. And it's a melting pot. of different cultures. So it's always exciting to visit New York.
Yeah, and even those buildings and skyscrapers, a lot of them have been built by the Mohawk workers that were working on the structure of the skyscrapers.
Yeah, the ironworkers. I mean, there's a long and proud history of Mohawk ironworkers working on the skyscrapers. A lot of them worked on the two World Trade Centers. You know, there's men that are still alive that worked on those buildings, and even before that. So, yeah, Mohawks helped, and Indigenous men helped to build New York City. So.
Right.
And people are very proud, you know, people in the communities are very proud of that history. And it comes from, you know, this sort of unbelievable balance that the men had walking these beams, you know, hundreds of feet in the air without any harnesses. It's, you know, as our people evolve, you know, perhaps we're not as adept as our ancestors were, but there's still, you know, many Mohawks that are there working in the city and ironworking, but we've left our mark there through them.
Yes, it was also a way to appropriate the changing world and keeping a feet, if not on the land, over the land. The traditional land of the Mohawk Nation.
Yeah, the fearlessness. I mean, I know I couldn't do it, but the fearlessness of some of them that are able to walk those high beams and work without that fear of heights. That's something to be greatly admired. And I've heard stories that they worked with a lot of Italian men. And they would teach them Kanehsatà, you know. So the signals that they were sending to them, they would teach the Italians words in our language, and that was the way that they worked together. So it's quite a partnership in a sense.
Yeah, and a famous Italo New Yorker, Scorsese, just made a film about the Osage killers of the flower moons, and this is also maybe reminiscent of those links between Italians and Mohawk in the building industry.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we think about history, you know, oftentimes we think about the negative, but there's a lot of positive in the history and the course of our relationship with Europeans. And, you know, I'm glad that people, at least in the mainstream, are becoming aware. That's not to say that we shouldn't be leading the way. We shouldn't be the consultants for these big films. But I think it's about time that our stories get told in the mainstream in a way that shows the strength of our people, the camaraderie, and the challenges, you know, of what it means to live a peaceful coexistence. And it's we're not there yet, you know. I think there's still a long way to go, but the only way you can meet people on their terms is to tell those stories in a way that they will understand and absorb it. And you will have always the exception, but I think storytelling through film is one of the most powerful tools that we can use. And I think of my cinematography teacher, Claudia Raschke, who did Julia. She was a cinematographer in the film about Julia Child, the famous cook. And she said, your camera has to you create sentences with the camera, and so I try to do that. I think it's probably a lifetime practice, but it's a really positive and good way to teach yourself how to use visual imagery to tell your story, because that's what we're working with. We're working in a visual industry. We're working with sound. We're working with, images, and especially the work that I'm doing. It's historical. There are a lot of historical stories, so you've got to go to archives. And I think it's a tool, that our ancestors didn't have. You talked about the wampum. Those were the tools, the visual tools that they used, right? And to remember, this is what we talked about. This is what we agreed upon. And it's important to bring that knowledge in, I think, as well, because just like as we lose elders who are first language speakers, we lose a part of ourselves when they go. It hasn't been taught to the next generation. So film, I think, is a really important part of that legacy that I think all of us are trying to leave behind for future generations to enjoy. That's if we survive the climate crisis and all these natural disasters. But it's really important, I think, and to be supported by, like your festival that you had. You're supporting Indigenous filmmakers who are telling their stories, and I don't think that was around. A lot of times, it's a very specific niche, but we need that support when we go out there, because not everybody gets us, right? Not everybody gets our stories or why we are the way we are.
Yes, I remember in the 90s, there was, first of all, there was very few Indigenous filmmaking. It was more filmmakers, sometimes very friendly filmmakers, but doing film about Indigenous issues. And slowly it's something that has been built during many years. And I remember at first we were seeing the festival more than a way to educate people about our realities. And this is the Indigenous filmmakers that told us, for us, it's difficult to access mainstream festivals first. And when we access, we never got the recognitions and the awards that are given and that are important in the portfolio of a filmmaker. And that's how we have created the competitive section. And I was very happy when in 2001 Rigoberta Menchú came to open the festival, and she didn't tell us nothing about it before. At the opening, in her speech, she told, I will let an award at my name in Montreal, and this is because we need, as Indigenous people, to be able to recognize the excellence in our artistic productions and cinematographic production before we can ask to the authors to do it. And so we have seen that the situation, the way it was analyzed here in Quebec, it was the same in Central America. This invisibilization, as they say in Spanish, of the Indigenous peoples by ignoring and marginalizing the Indigenous arts.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar in fine arts. I think, we were put into categories as if our art is inferior to anybody who is not Indigenous. And I remember being at your film festival when Rigoberta Menchú did that, and it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing that and think of all the hard work of people like yourself to bring a festival like this into reality and to expose the public to all the different stories. I mean, it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a team, right? And I think that we have come a long way in the last 33 years. And it's so exciting to see that. There's young filmmakers and then filmmakers like my age and my time of life. I think for myself as an artist, I graduated in 1990, just before the crisis. And, as a human rights advocate, environmental advocate, we are marginalized as Indigenous people and viewed as being against what's called progress, right? So it's challenging for us to have our voices heard. And film or the arts is a really beautiful way to get those stories heard, to acknowledge the talent that is in Indigenous communities that has always been there, but just needed the support. They just needed that little extra nudge and support to get to where we are today, to have Indigenous artists of all kinds, of all fields recognized. Just as important as those who are considered mainstream.
Well, we have one of your pieces in our office.
Yes.
Peut-être une minute. Peux-tu m'aider, Gabriel? On va montrer la toile. Yeah, I will ask Gabriel to help me. I will show it to you. It's just there.
I'm glad it's in a good home.
Yes, we... OK. Il faudrait juste montrer qu'on puisse voir la toile.
So that's a tribute to Kanehsatà, who was
yes, exactly,
in the American Indian movement and was killed.
Yeah. This is the.
There she is.
Oui.
Oh, I'm so happy. I'll have to come to your office someday soon, André, just to say hello.
Yes, and to reconnect with with this very strong painting, and we are really happy to have it in our office, and we are thinking about you, about the Mohawk resistance, but also about Katsi'tsakwas, this Mohawk. This Mi'kmaq woman with a tragic destiny.
Yes.
And this is also a painting about the role of the woman in the Indigenous resistance.
Yes. Yeah, I think that this is a story of, and I think that it goes true with any kind of resistance movement, that it's possibly the fear that is instilled, that people act so crazy. And then, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that trauma makes you not feel, not trust, not to speak, in the sense of, if I have a problem with you, I'm going to say it. I'm not going to kill you for it. I'm just, we've lacked that part of those ancestral teachings that teach us how to address each other in a way that is respectful. And, the tragedy of Kanehsatà, she had two young daughters. I met one, Denise, and, we forget sometimes in the resistance movement, because there's a goal, there's an aim, but we forget about our humanity sometimes. And when we see each other as humans, and I think maybe that's when we can get together and realize, what is our goal? What is the main goal here? In the United States, it's a very, very different, I guess, the way like the United States or the way Canada has reacted to Indigenous movements, and is very brutal, and there are casualties of this war. And I think, Katsi'tsakwas, her story is extremely important. I don't know if you've seen some of the documentaries about her, but we need to acknowledge the truth about our own resistance movements and our own history, so that we don't make those same mistakes in the future. But we're human, right? And we are flawed, and we make mistakes. But we need to recognize those who have made those important contributions to helping, society understand us.
Yes. I think with the Custer defeat, historical moment of the American army completely defeated by the Lakota forces, has been a traumatic moment for the colonizer, and I think they still live with that, and that's why they are so violent against the indigenous resistance or rights movement. They cannot support it, and they are still there with their big guns and the FBI, and they really want to fight violently against any affirmative movement, human rights movement. The Black resistance has been targeted the same way too.
Yeah, and I think about that kind of history, that sort of the fear and greed is the motivating. It moves the world in a different way, and to dehumanize Indigenous peoples means that Custard was a victim. Custard was not a victim. Custard was trying to massacre the Sioux, and they were prepared for him. And it's these moments in history that are skewed, and I think that as filmmakers, this is where our role is to tell that truth with evidence, with stories, with the perspectives, because we know that human rights is not profitable, right? We live in a capitalist society, so human rights it's not profitable to respect human rights, and to continue to deny us our humanity is a challenge that we're trying to overcome. I think, and history keeps repeating itself because the colonizer continues to try to shape us, to shape our identity, to shape how we live, to shape our governing structures, to give us these sort of piecemeal affirmative actions, but that are not long-term. They're all short-term. So the issue is very complex. That's why I think a lot of times, for me, when I think about my future projects, it's really about a series. Because if we were to do what needed to be done in one documentary, it would be a very long documentary. So, but we have such a rich history, and if we look, I mean, Custer's Last Stand aside, Indigenous people have always sought ways of peace, right? Always. And I think it's a tribute to our ancestral teachings that most people, I would say, not everybody, but most people want peace. They want to have a good life, but they also, a lot of Indigenous people want to preserve the land so that their children and their children's children will be able to enjoy the land. And that's something that is part of that human rights framework that we need to continue to push. And because if we just say it's our right, people don't understand it. They think, you were conquered. You should be happy with what you get, right? And we're not happy with the crumbs. We want to have that self-determining vision and respect for our human rights, including in filmmaking.
Yeah. We were speaking of cinema, but also in visual arts now. There is more and more recognition of Indigenous artists for their intrinsic values, not only because they are Indigenous. And this is at this moment you are orienting yourself towards a movie when your younger years was really focused on visual arts.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think of having both together in the future, or concentrate mainly on films?
Well, I for me, painting or drawing is very peaceful. It helps get me out of the chaos that we live in, as humanity, but in particular in my community. That there's always something. We're always still trying to fight for our land, whether it's from the nearby municipality of Oka or from Mohawks who are cutting the pines. You need an outlet to express that. So I try to find time to just like do little doodles, and I wish I had more time to paint. Right now I'm working on 2 documentaries, so it takes up a lot of my time. One is the story about Kanehsatà, why they would block the bridge and put their lives at risk for us. So I'm calling that one Oyak Gudu, which is hanging tobacco. And it's another word for warriors, the men who protect the people and the land. Mm-hmm. And then the second one is a celebration of 100-year anniversary of Deskahe, who was the Cayuga chief who went to the League of Nations in Geneva in 1923. So I was privileged enough to be at the celebrations in Geneva this past July. And the importance of Indigenous people at the international level. My elder who taught me was always saying, our issue and our rights are at the international level. And even Supreme Court Justice Beverly McLaughlin said that, Aboriginal rights have always been international. So, all this to say that for most of my life, I have been advocating for our rights, not just people from Kanehsatà, but Indigenous rights and women's rights. And my art has always been on the side. I've always continued to create, but I think documentary is helping me use that part of my creative brain in a different way. And so I have to accept the fact that that's going to dominate for a while, but I can still do my art, my visual art.
Yes, that's a very little known historic fact. This Iroquois chief that went to the Société des Nations and wanted the Iroquois Confederacy to be recognized internationally. And this is how the band councils were created, because they wanted to undermine, to sabotage the credibility of the spokesperson that was advancing the cause of the Indigenous people of Americas. And I think that there should be a big fiction film about him, because it is so strong and it is a great historical character.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you, André. I think there's, while he was in Geneva, the RCMP raided the longhouses in Six Nations and made it illegal. All traditional governments right across Canada, illegal People remember the potlatch ceremonies being criminalized, but they forget that the traditional governments were also. And I think because this Kahe had so many friends, I mean, he had the ear of the mayor of Geneva, several other states also agreed with what he was saying. And, you know, when I hear stories about him, they say he was a very kind man. You know, he took the time. There's a story where he's in a group of people, he's giving a speech, and a little boy is tugging on his sleeve and is asking him a question. So he stops and takes the time to answer the little boy, because you know, that's part of our ways. It's a part of our culture to recognize us all as equals, no matter what the age, and to, you know, the suffering that he had. He couldn't go home. He couldn't go back to Canada and Six Nations, so he had to stay with a friend, and he was sick. They didn't allow him to go to see his medicine people. And during the celebrations in Geneva, the Canadian ambassador recognized the harm that Canada caused Descahe, and that they wanted to change that part of the history of our relationship. So imagine 100 years ago, Descahe would have been so happy to have heard that, right? Mm-hmm. And so happy that he was remembered. And so, you know, if we think about 100 years from now, how they will remember our generation. Hopefully we'll have film still. So that's our job. You know, that's our job to make sure that we are remembered in history as being fighters for our people.
Yeah. I saw the last Denis Arcand's film, Testament, and well, I was not happy generally with the film, but I was happy to see Alex Rice as an actor having an important role in the story and speaking in Mohawk. So it was interesting, and I was. For me, it sounds funny when I heard the producer, Denise Robert, saying, "We have discovered a wonderful actress." But if the journalists that were in the room had been present doing their job at the Indigenous Film Festival in Montreal, they would have known this actress, and she would have been well known all over the place. So it was at the same time a good moment and a strange moment, because they are not able to all together in Montreal to see how they have failed before, and they try to do better now. That's the good good point of it. But this kind of oblivion of what has been before is not fairly honest, I should say.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's like as if, you know, all of a sudden we're just emerged when we've been there for decades, you know. And Alex Rice she was in those Twilight sagas, and she's in many other films. I think she's in, is it Birdie or Little Birdie?
Yeah. Katsi'tsakwas also in a production about Lewis and Clark travel, and many films where she has been, and well, we know her.
Yes.
Obviously. Also, you have told me a day that there is a lot of things that have not been said yet or publicly about the period of the Mohawk resistance in the 90s. When do you think the I don't know if I can say the hidden realities or the not well-known facts, when it will be the time to tell the whole story?
Well, I'm hoping to do a little bit of it in the second documentary about, what the people were thinking. I found this wonderful clip in the CBC archives. CBC has been very gracious in allowing me to enter the archives. And there was a time when, the government just wanted the barricades down, especially on the Mercier Bridge. And they invented some kind of scheme where they were saying there's weapons in the Longhouse. These traditional people, they're actually very violent, inherently violent, right? So when the army was moving in, so the army moved in, and there was 40 women blocking the highway on 207, and they fought with the soldiers, right? The soldiers didn't care that they were women; they fought with them, and so there's this wonderful clip, and it's very powerful of one of the women. I think it's the late Marilyn Simpson saying, "I want to speak to their mothers. I wanted to speak to these boys' mothers." And Steve Hauser, who was the reporter at the time, is saying, "Well, why do you want to speak to their mothers?" And she says, "I want to know if they taught their boys to beat up women." And I find that's like a really fascinating part of that story that is connected to us, because they were going through their own hardships, right? And it's such a complex story. I'm not sure if I'll get through it in my lifetime, but I'm definitely going to try. But the challenge is because it's historical. I have to have access to archival footage, which CBC in Montreal, anyways, is granting me. And then it's getting people to talk. When we're amongst each other, everybody's sharing their stories. But when it comes to being interviewed, it's like, oh no, I don't want to be on camera. So that's my challenge, right? But because it's much easier when it comes from someone I interview rather than me narrating it and say this is what happened. I want someone to tell me firsthand experience. So if we get to that point, then we'll reveal a lot. Just Alex Patterson is someone too that I want to get a hold of. I don't know where he is, how to get a hold of him. It's getting a hold of these people, either from the SQ. The Canadian Army has been a very evasive character in all this. But just to say that I think if we can get more people to talk about what they went through, we were denied our food, basic human rights, fundamental human rights, water, medicine, free flow of traffic. Those were like the conditions for negotiating. And like I said before, the second the ink was not even dry, the SQ were saying, well, we don't recognize that agreement. We don't care what the government says. We have a job to do, and we're not allowing any food, or we're not allowing free passage of people. And just the challenges of talking to men who were tortured by the Katsi'tsakwas Quebec and the Canadian Army when they were arrested. It's very difficult for people to talk about trauma. So I'm hoping that with time and maybe the realization of how important it is to tell the story, that I'll have more participants to interview. But the ones I have interviewed have given me like some excellent, very rich storytelling.
Yes, and I suppose when they can speak about this period with a Mohawk filmmaker, it's easier for the people to get into that stuff. This is the importance to have our own filmmakers. They are also storytellers that can bring part of the history that wouldn't be known otherwise.
Yeah, and it helps to have like unique access, right, to a story, because I know the stories, and I know the questions to ask. I know what I don't know all the stories. Over the 33 years, I've heard from all different kinds of people, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, Mohawks, non-Mohawks, about what they were doing. I'm thinking about Solidarité avec les Autochtones, this organization that was protesting, and I'm sure you were at these protests too in Montreal, and how important that solidarity is to the survival of a people who are trying to just, we're placed in a position that we don't want to be in. So there's so many layers of this story, and the government will not be honest. Of course, they will not say why they did this, but I'll do my best. I'm going to do my best. For me, it's very interesting.
Yeah. But if I look at the way the story of the event of 1990 are told today, there is a lot of progress, because the media that during the event, they were so racist, and they were so only a line of transmission from the army propaganda and government propaganda. And now they are able to see that there was another side, and this other side have its own rights and its own way to see the crisis. We had, of course, the famous Ellenis documentary about Kanehsatà, and also Beans have been released recently. So slowly, I think I think that's what is interesting now, because usually it is we have been taught that normally the history is told by the one who have
the victor.
The victors. Thank you.
Yes.
But somehow I don't think we have been completely the victors in 1990, but at least we have our part of telling the story, and the history now is not what it would have been if it had stayed the way it was in that period.
I would tend to agree with you, because I think that in 1990 people were sleeping, and this woke everybody up. This was like, wow, and I think we needed, as painful as it was, I recognize it as being a seminal moment for Indigenous people's human rights. Although we could not make human rights complaints in 1990, we were told human rights does not apply to you. It's the Indian Act. So we've come a long way in essence, and telling those stories, I think, I'm hoping anyways, not only will it enlighten people, but they will learn from those lessons of history and be better for it, rather than thinking that being a militant or whatever is means that you're a badass, excuse the language. But, I think about those elders, they spoke softly. They spoke to government with respect, and were not given that respect. And so we are standing on their shoulders. We are standing on their strength, their work. And I want to honor that through those stories.
So we will keep waiting and looking forward to see your next documentaries. And thank you for sharing all this with us today. And you are, of course, welcome to come to our office when you want.
Well, thank you so much, André, for your leadership in supporting Indigenous artists, and to Présence Autochtone. I'm so grateful for the award, and I'm also grateful for you inviting me to this podcast. And I have a lot of respect and admire all your work, all the efforts, creating such a powerful and wonderful festival and Chokchage for all Indigenous people. So thank you for your work too.
Yeah, thank you. But the voice of the artist is so strong that even if it is very difficult sometimes, it is also I am very grateful to all what the artists brought to the world, to the humanity, and this make the difficult easy. Yeah.
Easy.
So,
Yeah.
thanks
you
a
so
lot.
much.
Alexandre, do you want to add something?
No, Denis, je pense que I think it's mostly time's up because I think you'll be busy at 1 p.m. So
It is almost one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we say next Wednesday to our audience.
So we'll see you next week. This was an interesting podcast this week.
Thank you so much.
Big wet shown up.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye bye.